From We Are Spectacular, this is the Spectacular Marketing Podcast, a podcast about everything brand, marketing, digital and social for the food and drink industry and beyond. It was an early start for myself and today's guest, James Hacon. James, some of you may know already, is the MD of Think Hospitality and also the co-founder at Restaurant Marketer and Innovator community. We met at the Charlotte Street Hotel for a bit of posh breakfast. James had a bit of a game of two halves in terms of the experience, so told he wasn't allowed in because he was 5 minutes early. Not really what you'd expect from a hospitality venue, but it was saved by a porter who actually then made him feel welcome and turned the whole experience around. Today we touch on that. We also talk about some things dear to my heart in terms of setting up your brand strategy correctly, what challenges marketers are facing and brands are facing in the market today, and also the importance of engaging and inspiring your employees throughout your organisation, because at the end of the day, they're the real people that are delivering the real experience for your customers. So it gives me great pleasure today to welcome James Hacon. I've said that right, I think.
You have indeed.
I always get muddled. It is my dodgy Scottish accent as well. From Think Hospitality, he's the MD there. And also, if that's not enough, is the co-founder of this amazing new community, which has really piqued the interest of the restaurant industry and beyond, I think. The Restaurant Marketer Innovator.
Thank you for the introduction.
Yeah. And we're proud owners of a couple of awards from that, which was great. So proudly displayed in the office.
They're pretty heavy, aren't they? They're
great. So if there's a burglar, it's totally fine, which is all good. And yeah, people comment on it when they see it and stuff. So it's not quite as good as there's an agency that we sort of collaborate with sometimes. And when you go into their office, there's almost like this walk of fame kind of thing. And they've got a BAFTA.
Oh, wow.
And you're just like, well, you know you've made it when you've got a BAFTA. So,
I think it was when I was doing research one time for a client and looked at the Chipotle brand, and they won, I think it was an Oscar or one of these, amazing piece for the video work they did on that scarecrow. And you think,
that's right.
Yeah, if I can work on a campaign like that, and in fact, if anyone's listening, call Mark and I up, and we'll jointly create something that we think's an Oscar winner.
That'd be amazing. It'd be unbelievable. I think a while back, we did manage a Webby, but we sent Mai from Yo Sushi to go, so that's one of my biggest, well, I'm glad she went, but biggest regret is that I didn't go. I was just like, damn it. So you can't take those awards with you, unfortunately. Is that like a Michelin star? You can't take it with you?
I'm sure. We haven't yet defined that, but I'm sure if anyone wants a replica of who's for a home, we can certainly get another one remade for them.
Get down to Trophy Centre.
It's funny, actually. The company that we got the trophies from was so impressed with the trophy, they rang them like, we really want to use it in our marketing. Can we use it? So I was like, yeah, that's cool. Like, feel free.
For a discount.
And so we were the front page of like Trophy Weekly.
Oh no! So that's like one of those things you see on Have I Got News for You?
Yeah, I mean, I was like, this is pretty random, but I suppose if we're doing the exact same in our industry, so why can't the trophy industry have their own magazine?
That's it. So cool. Well, I wonder who does their awards, or who watches the Watchmen, or something like that. So we've just had a rather lovely chat and breakfast, and we should have probably recorded that. So that was in the Charlotte Street Hotel, which is way posher than I ever get to go to usually. So I think they were eyeing me up and down a little bit, thinking this is a Greg's customer coming in to have some breakfast. But we managed to sneak in, so that was kind of good.
Ferndale is so great too. Love that. They love their places.
Definitely. They've just always got that kind of classy vibe sort of thing, and it was just attention to detail and and all that great stuff, which was brilliant. So I guess I've dragged you in here to talk more about you than me, of course. And part of that, was just for me. We've known each other for a few years now, but kind of from afar, and certainly from my side, big respect from afar. And we kind of operate in the same world a bit, but then we never really cross paths, so it's quite an interesting thing. But I've gotten to know you more since a wee booty call that happened last January, where it was, could you come and speak at this thing? And I had a day of stuff, and I managed to clear it out. And it was just one of the, hands down, one of the best sort of events I had been to. And the audience was so different as well from a lot of the industry events. So you and the Propel guys have really attracted this slightly different sort of audience, which was really exciting. And also the guy that poured me pretty much my first pint was in the audience as well, a guy called Kenny Blair from Buzzworks. So I was just so excited when I saw him. It felt so odd to be sort of presenting when he was sitting there, when you knew, you were definitely over 18, of course, but
of course. We'll believe you.
So in terms of you then, it's quite a story. And also how you've packed it into, such a young age as well. So without being patronising, you've just done brilliantly well. So what happened? How are you sitting here today? What's going on?
It's a pretty unique way of building a career, I think. Certainly not traditional in any way, but I quite regularly quote being dragged up. I say raised, but it's more dragged up through the hospitality industry.
Mm-hmm.
My parents owned hospitality businesses, and it really gave me the most amazing ability to kind of, I suppose, that being hospitable by nature and just the social element of running restaurants was really part of me from growing up. I also think a hard work ethic was there. I think I was in a kitchen washing pots at illegal ages, probably pre 12 years old, helping out, and that really instilled that hard work ethic, which is really important. But I think I did very well academically, but after deciding that I didn't want to continue a career in law, which is what I was planning to do, I kind of felt as if I got coerced into it a little bit at sixth form. Almost certainly I couldn't go and work in hospitality when I was getting A's, and the angle was, well, you ought to be going to law, you ought to be an Oxbridge candidate, and that's what we pushed, but I was pushed quite firmly. And actually what I really loved was this. I loved the hospitality sector. I love the buzz of service. I love the buzz of people, and I really love the vibrancy of food and drink and creating experiences. And I think with the basis of family background and some difficult times as a child within the family, that meant that at a very young age, at 16, 17, I was given the ability to run venues, which was really brilliant because it gave me this skill and this kind of set of skills that have helped me ever since. But my first, I suppose, proper job, paid job, was at Gleneagles Hotel in Scotland. And I spent a few years there, between there and a couple of other bits going back and forth, but just loved the hotel. It's such a magical place. I can't recommend it enough. But I think ultimately what it taught me was kind of finish and polish, but also how to deliver amazing service, but in a very friendly way. And I think if you contrast Gleneagles as a service style to, say, the Ritz or what the Savoy was like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I think you can absolutely see that what they delivered was something that was much more personal. And I think that's been a great foundation for a career, really.
And how's your golf?
We had to play, in essence, when we were there. So I can play. I don't particularly like playing, ruining a good walk, as they say. Right. But we go to a driving range every now and again. I live very close to Woburn Golf Club, which is a beautiful walk, if not a good game of golf, I hear, as well.
No, it's a nice place, definitely. I used to live up that neck of the woods, but I was sort of playing more on the council courses. I was too worried about ripping up the lovely turf, when I was sort of going round. And then, so from Gleneagles, then what kind of happened?
So when the recession hit, in 2007, 2008, the hotel went through a pretty bad patch. I think a huge percentage of their business was banks. In fact, and I always used to laugh that the first minister at the time was Alex Salmond, and I think he spent more time there than he did in Hollywood.
Oh, really?
But that all disappeared literally overnight.
Right.
And I think it was a tough time for the hotel. They were making lots of cutbacks. And actually I was kind of kept on, and that was great. But my job was very diverse. And I think that level of diversity gave me a hunger to want to do more. But the reality is that there wasn't those kind of jump ups within the management ranks. So we did the most drastic thing you could think possible, and decided to take a year off and move to New Zealand. So my girlfriend, now fiance, Erin, and I moved to New Zealand on a working holiday visa. Within a few weeks of being there, I was given the most amazing opportunity to open a brand new hotel and 2 restaurants within a kind of coastal location in the South Island of New Zealand. I was originally kind of deputy manager, and then got made group GM at quite a young age, which was fantastic. We won Best New Hotel in New Zealand. We got into the Best 50 Restaurants in New Zealand. And it was the most amazing place to be at 23, 24 years old. Was heading up this beautiful location with an office that looked out over the Pacific Ocean. But I think it, again, really helped my hunger. And when the hotel sold, 18 months later, it was an investor-founded hotel, in essence. It was created by developers. So 18 months later, I was offered the job to stay on, decided to use the opportunity to go off and actually fulfill what lots of people were offering me, was to go and consult with them on new projects. That's how I ended up in the world of consultancy, really.
So that was still New Zealand, Australia, this kind of area?
Yeah, so I built a consultancy kind of agency in New Zealand, ended up merging with a company in Australia, moved to Australia. So altogether I was in the Southern Hemisphere for 4.5 years, before coming back to work with Anne and the brilliant team at Elliott's agency for a couple of years. Again, really helped them kind of position where they were, take some of the work they were doing and try to kind of better package it and better promote what they were doing, and also developing the insight and strategy side of their business, which was really interesting. And I mean, what a great way to come back to the UK. So I couldn't be any more thankful to Anne for that opportunity, really. So
no, I mean, she's super kind, from that perspective, and also, just interesting seeing that business grow as well, with the new offices and all that kind of thing. So yeah, she really, continues to do a fab job, which is brilliant. So then what happened next? So then you sort of thought, I'm going to go out on my own, I'm going to give this a go. What was the next move?
Yeah, so I think the view was that I've founded 4 businesses in my life, and I thought, well, actually, I want to do this myself. But as is quite often the case, you find an anchor brand that you're going to work with that's going to help you through that stage, and that was Thai Leisure Group for me. And I kind of really fell in love with the way that business was operating and the people within it, and just saw the most amazing opportunity to do great things within it. So I ended up going virtually full-time, not quite, but still keeping the Restaurant Marketer Innovator and some other bits on the side. And I kind of got sucked into the business and the official title was Brand Strategy Director, but it incorporated kind of uninhibited access to improve anything in the business that we felt needed to be improved, which there's not many of those opportunities come along. And obviously a tough time in the sector right now, but fundamentally it was really good business with some really great people, particularly at site level.
I mean, I think just as an outsider, and I don't know Thai Leisure Group at all, personally or anything, but as an outsider, and the way Ian seems to run it, etc., like there just seems to be such a strong, happy culture, within it, which I think, sort of emanates through. And then anytime I was sort of seeing, I think that's pretty much how we kept in touch, was just Twitter at the time and all the rest of it. And, just every day you're like, oh, I'm in Aberdeen, I'm in Glasgow, I'm in Leeds, I'm in there. And you're just like, bloody hell, man, how's he doing this, Because you just seem to be, like, relentless. We're launching this, we've got a team day for that, and I'm just thinking, wow, the energy behind, obviously, them trying to, move that forward and keep the business alive and, energetic and all these things, I think, it's kudos to people who don't just have their yearly conference and some internal comms emails, and you could see that, they really mean it, man. They really are all sort of drinking from the same font or whatever, which is really impressive to see. And I think a lot of people talk about, how do I get my stories out there? It's just doing it naturally, and it's a million tweets rather than staged ones or anything like that, and I think if you've got that skill just to communicate what's happening on the inside naturally, it just goes a lot further. There's so many things I could probably tell you about Thai Leisure Group now just from seeing that, but it was not a huge marketing effort or calculated or the best shot in the world, or it was just consistency of message about the team being first,
And I think that comes from the top. I think that Ian's really got into Twitter, and I think that's really been quite effective. And it's amazing when you sit and speak to frontline team in that business, that people who are waiting or washing pots or doing any of those things are following on Twitter and can tell you exactly what I've been doing or Ian's been doing and have this engaging conversation. You think, wow, I think that openness means so much. Yeah,
because there's brands that we're seeing right now and they're saying, what system do I need to use to, get my staff engaged? And it's like, the major platforms that everyone's looking at every second of just use those, but it's like, oh, should we use Yammer or should we use this? And it's like, no, because you're forcing people to use something that they don't use.
I've seen a few businesses recently look at Facebook for Business or Workplace, I think it's called. Workplace, and I think it's interesting that, I agree, I think that connecting with people on the platform they're using anyway, rather than trying to shove them into something that you feel you need to control, is absolutely the way to go. And actually, I think that there's always going to be issues. There's always going to be things that come up and those challenges, and there are people that you let go from businesses for one reason or another that may raise their head and all those things. Yeah. And you know what? If you front it up and you deal with it as a human being, I think that it's soon overcome. I think actually it's when you go into perceived crisis mode that it's much harder. And let's face it, we're dealing with those issues every day from our customers and the feedback we get from our customers. So why not see it as being an equal, open space for employees and team members as well?
Definitely. And it's the whole thing, like, when, I used to work at Pret as well, it was always the thought of that even if you gave someone every single piece of information about Pret in the world ever, they wouldn't be able to execute on it. So there's so many people like, oh, I couldn't see how I did this, or my process of that, or my recipe for this, or do you know what? If they really want to, they'll figure it out and they'll give it a go, but they probably won't be able to do it as well as you do it.
I think it's interesting. I think there's a balance between teaching and training standards and then really embedding and empowering culture. And I do think it's a very interesting balance when it comes to the work that we're often doing, which is about building brands. And ultimately, let's face it, but regardless of what your brand is only ever as good as the perception of your customers and the people who are living it every day. And I'd speak at a conference last year in Amsterdam at the end of last year and was asked to, I was the only person in the kind of experience space, I suppose, rather than a product space, speaking at a marketing conference. And as you know, very used to speaking at hospitality-based conferences, but one of the first ones I've done where it's been out of sector. And before me was Diageo. There was some people from American Tobacco earlier on in the day, and it was amazing actually seeing how they work, because it's so very different to how we work as in our sector. And I think that link to operations and that link to the people is probably the biggest difference. And one of the things I said there is, I think in any given day, in any given customer journey, there's probably 60 to 70 customer touch points where someone can either delight or screw up on our brand. And I think it's really interesting that the reality is that you can't go about trying to teach, or I think you can train standards, but you're much better to say, look, we're going to pick 4, 5, 6 key pieces of that journey that we're going to really over-index in delighting. And then the other bits, we're actually going to, whilst we might kind of nudge on it and train on it inadvertently, by focusing on those 6 or 7, it will hopefully dissipate down to the rest of the journey, that it creates a high level of engagement. But actually, I think that over-index is the way that I think you can really win with driving customer satisfaction and delight.
Definitely. And, I had a couple of good examples even yesterday. I was out and about, and I went to Olenstein in Kensington, I guess. Where's the Daily Mail building? Is that Kensington?
Yeah, I think I know the place you mean. Yeah.
So I had to go into the Daily Mail building. That was fun. So across the road, Olenstein. So I went in, and I was in a rush. So I just wanted quite a bit of porridge and a coffee, and no one in the place. Just empty. And then you go in, and you've got to take a ticket, which felt really cold. I mean, I'd really urge them to
As the
rethink
1970s.
that. Yeah, so even worse
Delicatessen.
than Argos, yeah. And there was no need for the ticket. No one asked for you for the ticket. No one talked about it. I watched customers after. But anyway, they couldn't get the porridge. So after accepting the order, 5 minutes went, someone comes up to me, sorry, can you wait another 5 to 10 minutes for the porridge? And it was like, well, no, because I was just coming in for a quick mouthful and, getting over. But then, to be fair, it wasn't really what I wanted, and not good for the calories and stuff. But
cinnamon bun instead.
Cinnamon. That's what she came up with. She goes, I couldn't quite catch. She said, would you like this? And I was like, yeah, that's fine, yeah, whatever. Came up, and honestly, it was the weight of a small child. And, and she gave us that. And it was, but, to be fair, she rescued the situation, which was really fantastic. And then actually, just a masterclass in service yesterday, Bills and Hammersmith, just not a foot wrong, everything just on time, on spec. Great upselling, by the way, as well, if anyone's listening from Bills. Just super upselling, so much so that he sort of forced the olives on us when we said we didn't want them, but we gladly had them, but actually hadn't said that I wanted them. So anyway, they were delicious. So so there was so I think there's those judging the mood, judging the customer, and
but I think that it's interesting. People talk about it being innate, and I don't think it's innate. I was thinking back to my time at Gleneagles. What is it that kind of encourages that behaviour?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I think that it's absolutely about making sure everybody's really clear in terms of that whole journey. I mean, I remember sitting at induction at Gleneagles, and obviously I was probably one of the minority British people working at Gleneagles at that time. And I think that one of the things they did was work through how to converse with people and how to talk. And I remember thinking, well, I'm British and I don't really need to be taught how to speak English. Yeah. And actually what I realised several years on is it wasn't being taught how to speak English. It was being taught the art of conversation. And to me, I think it's interesting that I built up a bit of a framework for what I think takes service from being okay to great. And I think it's about the art of conversation. I think it's the art of preempting somebody, and I think it's the art of recommendation. And I think it's interesting that if you twist those things, preempting isn't about hanging around. It's not about kind of that creepy, awful service of waiting close to someone's table that we quite often link to being high-end restaurants or very local restaurants. It's about knowing when someone's going to want something and kind of learning from the way that guests interact. And I think part of that preempting is waiting for people to walk through a door. And in lots of ways, I know it's not nice to say, but it's about making judgments and using those judgments to then help to make sure that somebody's experience is as good as it can be. I think the preempting piece for me, the recommendation piece for me is actually really twisting it up on upselling. I think we're very focused on upselling because, let's face it, we're generally a sector built on business people when it comes to the larger businesses, and I think, but actually if you flip that round and talk about recommendation, and the focus is much more about adding to someone's experience, that stuff will come naturally. And actually the olives thing, you may not have necessarily thought that you wanted them.
It was actually like a drug pusher. I was like, whoa, I don't want it. And eventually got it.
But no, it's very interesting. I think that whole piece on being able to rescue or save comes down to really great training and also clearly the recruitment piece. But I also think it's about instilling what it is you're trying to achieve as a brand. This morning was a great example, actually. Before you turned up, I don't know whether you saw my tweet, but I was there 40 minutes beforehand because I've train issues, as people may have seen on Twitter. So I got there 40 minutes beforehand. I was 5 minutes early for the restaurant opening. And I went to walk in from the front door, and what looked like the manager said, "I'm really sorry, but we don't open for 5 minutes." And literally kind of encouraged me to go and wait back outside on the street. I thought the whole place is fully set.
It's Charlotte
and you
Street
think,
Hotel.
Come on, this is a decent hotel. And do you know who saved it? Was a porter was sweeping the street outside. He saw this interaction and said to me, "I'm really sorry about that. Can I take your coat and bag and put it in the locker room? I can get you seated. And why don't I go and get you some water?" And
Bingo.
suddenly, boom. And actually, at that exact moment, my reaction before that was going to be, I'm going to text Mark and we're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because actually, it annoyed me that much.
Yeah.
And you think, it's that officiousness. And
it spoils your day, though, right? You know, even a small example. We went to a wee children's theatre thing at the Brighton Fringe with a wee one the other day. And yeah, empty theatre. And you go in and they say, sit where you like. So we sit where we like. And then come over. You can't sit there because of the performance, and that's your blood's just boiling. And you're just like, and I'm not an angry person. I'm quite zen and, in touch with the Buddhist side of things and all that stuff. But I was just like, oh, come on. So I ended up going and I went and had a pint because I just was like, and my wife had a bit of a go at it, which was a bit much, a bit of a go at the girl, but it was just like,
did you use it as an excuse to get a pint, Mark?
It was so hot in there. It was a really hot day, and it was in an inflatable tent sort of thing, no aircon, so it was just like, oh god. So yeah, it was wind in the willows, so I missed the amazing performance there, but never mind. But yeah, I think it's that two things. Computer says no, you've got to get that out of your organisation, and funnily enough, Ben at Forth, who's an amazing leader, he talks about that, it can't be computer says no, and also something like, employee engagement expert we partner with a lot, Alex. She talks about leadership is everywhere. So it's not position oriented at all. So it sounds like that porter should not be a porter.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's about someone taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And this is what I say over and over again. The times I get aggravated with service, I will actually often say to somebody, look, I don't care where this drops between your service, but right now I want you, as the person standing in front of me, to take responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think if everybody did that within a service environment, actually it flows so much easier.
It's hard being a professional consumer, though, like we're in, because we've seen the other side. So I try my best not to pull that stuff, but sometimes just like, come on, man, really?
My fiance used to ask me to put my back to the restaurant, so we'd always sit near a wall and I'd be facing the wall, because otherwise I'd be a nightmare.
Right.
Actually, I've got to say, I've overcome that now. I think I can, I've got enough self-discipline, and now she's the one that with the issue, so we have to swap it around. So because she's in customer service and guest relations in our sector, and I'm like, a large mirror here?
Yeah, it's just blinkers. It's really difficult to switch off, though. It really is. So, thinking about, the market that's going on at the moment, apocalypse, opportunity, how are you sort of viewing what's going on out there from your point of view?
I think it's a rebalance. I think it's an interesting time right now. And I don't think we can, whilst a lot of the stuff I'm going to go on to say, I think the kind of precursor to that is I think it's also made tougher with all this government regulation and all these extra costs. I know we keep using the term headwind of cost, and I think that's the truth of it. And I think if we were potentially better prepared as a sector or had a different base, I think we'd be in a different position. But I think these issues that we're seeing are probably just made much, much worse because of a lack of preparation. I think we've clearly outstripped the demand with the supply over the last few years.
That's a good way to think about it.
And I think we are sitting in a position where in the past, you may well have gone to an independent restaurant. You might have gone every now and again. We've obviously, the amount of eating out the home occasions has increased. The amount of dining out has increased. And with that, I think we've seen investors and landlords particularly see this opportunity. The investors have pumped huge amounts of money into restaurant groups. I think the landlords have built, and continue to build. In fact, there's not a day that goes by where I don't have a scheme on my desk for a client or an investment of mine. And I think, wow, how are you putting another 16 restaurants in Manchester? That city is already beyond saturation point. But I think that aside, you think, well, ultimately, with the money and the spaces, people ran to grow. And let's face it, for the last few years, growth has been driven by new site acquisition and development. And we had huge new openings teams within these businesses. And it's funny that I remember talking to people 3 or 4 years ago and saying, why is it that with your CapEx spend, you're only considering new sites? Why are you not looking within that CapEx, investing back in your existing estate, but not just from a standpoint of the refurbishments and the interiors, actually on a much broader basis, considering with that spend how you're going to build the digital infrastructure, the technological infrastructure to improve in the future, and also I expect increasing how you engage with your teams to make sure they're much better at getting that recommendation in that upsell that we were talking about before. But we seem to have been missing that because we were focused on new. And I think the reality is that from a consumer's perspective, I went from what was probably a poor or to average independent restaurant experience. It was certainly inconsistent. And I saw something that was flashy, that had a much better view of, much better interior design, probably had a much better thought out menu, may well have been a little bit more expensive, but that's great because I know I'm consistently going to get okay to good food. And actually what I wasn't getting before was consistency. I think what's happened over the period of time is that actually as we've grown and we've kind of outstripped our own, and often within the restaurant space, I think some of these businesses have outstripped their own processes and their own standards because they've grown too quickly. And I think what's happened with that is it's not been consistent. So actually what you're talking about is inconsistency at these new places. You're also talking about this isn't 1, 2, 3 new places that I could go. It's, well, on the corner of my local supermarket site, there's 6 restaurants. There's another 7 in the high street. There's another 5 up by the stadium near where I live, and so on and so forth. And you say, well, suddenly before I might have had 5 options. I've now got 25 options. I'm going to spread my money. I may actually be going out far more than I was before. But alongside all this, what's happened is I think that independence in the pub sector has improved so drastically that these people are now providing consistency and great food. And I think that's created a space where, as consumers, we've got choice. And actually, what would we prefer? Frankly, I think you speak to most consumers and they would prefer something that has an independent or individual feel to it. And actually what we've created for the most part is cookie cutter sites from big brands. And don't get me wrong, I think there's lots of space for those big brands. But I think that you've got to consider much better the kind of experience factor within your site. I know Bill's at the moment have gone through that process of, I think, bringing back Bill Collison to do some work on the interiors.
He's sort of always been there, he's definitely kind of always been around, but they're definitely pushing him more as a figurehead. I'm so gutted as well as now being a newly found Brighton boy and all the rest of it. The team had a meeting with Bill and I wasn't in that day. And I was just like, crap. Because I just really wanted to meet him because, all those weekends we used to go into Brighton years ago, we just absolutely were in love with the original couple of Bill's, and continued to do a good job, but it's a different thing than it was in a lot of ways. But yeah, so I just was like, I just would love. And then I got sent pictures. We helped on the Brighton relaunch, and I got pictures sent back. I should have been at that as well, didn't make it with work or whatever. And it was Bill with Fatboy Slim. And I'm just like, come on. Just like... So, and then I missed Fatboy Slim again at the Ivy opening. So Charlie very kindly sent me a note and said, do you and your wife want to come along to the Ivy opening in Brighton? Again, I was up in London, didn't he And yeah, she said, I saw a picture on Twitter just going, Fatboy Slim DJ'd at that. So I've had two near misses. Was the picture
from your wife on Twitter?
Well, no, she didn't go. She's teaching stuff. So literally a school night. So, and the thing about being Scottish, as you may know from Gleneagles, there's no middle gear if you're Scottish on drinking. So you've either got the off switch or you've got the on switch, and having a couple doesn't really happen, especially at an opening night party.
So at this point, I really shouldn't be commenting because my fiance is Scottish. Yeah, very strongly, no comment.
You know it. So anyone standing out to you in the market then that I know there's a lot of the usual suspects that just continue to do an amazing job, but is there anyone that you're thinking, oh yeah, they're really smashing it right now?
I think it's interesting. I think there's a number of these smaller brands that are sitting with 5, 6, 7 sites, maybe up to 10, that I think we can all think of those people who I think are waiting in the wings. And it's interesting that the conversations I've been having recently with people, particularly in respect of our early stage investment piece, is with those types of people who actually, I think, can learn from some of the challenges the bigger groups have had in terms of being more individual in all of these, in their rollout, thinking a bit differently, and also, but actually I've got a much greater opportunity. I mean, one brand we're involved with has recently taken an ex-Jamie site and another ex-Carluccio site, and these sites, there's clearly a proliferation of sites coming up, and a number of them are fully fitted out.
Right.
And suddenly you're in a really great space in terms of the cost of going in and starting a business within this environment, but also new sites. I mean, I had an offer for one of these brands come through from a landlord of £250,000 ingoing reverse premium, and on top of that, a year rent free. I think that you look at that compared to anything in the past, and you'd have absolutely been in a premium position, and you may well have got some rent free, but probably not much. I think it's those brands that I think there's kind of next tier down, and I think that it'd be unfair for me to name lots because there are lots of them. So,
anyone? I'm not going to push you on that, am I?
No, I think it's interesting. It's difficult because obviously we're talking to so many people, and I don't want it to come across as
someone you're not talking to.
Me pimping my own investments or.
So are you going to do a Darren Brown thing where you say whichever one you're thinking of, that's the one I'm thinking of?
There we go.
Is that a good way to?
With that.
Is that a good way to do it? Damn it! I was really hoping you would answer that question. You avoided it at breakfast too. Okay, so marketing stuff. The changing role of what's expected, the changing role of the department, the changing role of the discipline. Yeah, a lot of change.
I think there is, and I think that it's interesting. That's partly why I went about chasing Mr. Charity at Propel to work with me to create the Restaurant Marketer Innovator.
Did you catch him?
I did, yeah.
Rugby tackled him.
Luckily, he always answers my calls, which is very lovely.
Yeah.
So,
God, he's quick on email, isn't he?
Very.
Oh my God, I've never seen anyone as good as that. He's very prompt. It's good. It's a good skill to have.
No, amazing, and always so on it. But I suppose it's amazing, isn't it, that as a sector, 10 years ago, we didn't have many multi-site brands. And what that meant is, the reality is that you didn't have, and you certainly didn't have the proliferation of that kind of mid-market, large groups. So you might have had your big players like M&B and the Restaurant Group and what was Traeger. And there would have been marketing people within those environments. But beyond that, where would marketing have been? It might have been at an independent restaurant. It might have been as a kind of coordinator. And it, frankly, probably didn't really exist very much. I think look beyond that and look at where we are today. And we've got so many businesses that have got 10 to 50 sites that have got really, really impressive marketers within them. And I felt that there was no real coming together, bringing those people together to share. I think within our sector, a lot of the conferences are very operator focused. And frankly, as a sector, the sector's been very operator focused in the past. And I think if you look at the top tier of leadership in most of our big businesses, they're mostly from the former pub groups.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that they would have risen the ranks, and the MDs and CEOs have come from that and background. I think you look and you say, well, now we are much more brand focused. We're probably, particularly right now, given how tough the market is, it's not about growing our market by expanding our sites. It's going to be about capturing market share. So I think that that's much more the skill of a seasoned marketer. I also think that when we're talking about individuality of brands and so on, and creating individuality in sites, again, that comes down to someone that's got a marketing background. So I think that the role of marketer is becoming ever more important in our sector. But I also think that it's being professionalised as well. So you're seeing far more marketers on the board of businesses, and you're also seeing far more marketers take that step from being a marketer into being an MD and CEO. And that's been a trend that the FTSE 250 has seen. I saw some analysis on this recently over the past 20 years, is it went from a traditional background of financiers, and now there's a much broader set, including brand marketing, innovation, strategy roles coming into those senior positions. So whilst, I mean, for operators listening, I don't think that it's that you can't get into senior leadership through that route, because that's clearly would be wrong. But I think that it'd be a much broader route to getting into the top roles within the sector. But then, as I said, also there's the piece that at board level, marketing and strategic thinking has got a lot more of an important part to play.
Yeah, and I think there's a rub there in a sort of juxtaposition almost, which is you as what kind of company are you trying to be? So are you setting up for the short term gain, financial benefits, people quite rightly being selfish maybe about a bonus or an investment flip or whatever's going on? Or are you thinking, do you know what, I'm going to do something seismic here that's then going to set this up for the next 15 years and 20 years that everyone's going to benefit from? And I think with the best will in the world, with a lot of the operators that I've met, they are quite rightly working on that short-term basis, where it is, because they've not been exposed to the world of marketing. Also, when I've been in past jobs, you've almost had to do like a diplomatic job for marketing to actually get them to understand the power of it. They think you're a poster boy or promotion jockey, or it's a load of fluff, or
colouring in department.
All that.
That's my favourite.
Exactly, there you go, crayons and all that. And I think what is nice, I think there's a thing that's talked about like IQ, EQ, and I think someone with that EQ, if you look at it now, all the words that are being thrown at us in meetings are, I want engagement from my staff. I want to attract the best people. I want to retain, the best people. We want authenticity. And all of that's just not going to come from a spreadsheet or, being, you're going to have to open it all out to then saying, it's actually a huge marketing job on the inside. So what's the culture? What does the brand stand for? How's everyone living that? How are you living your values? So it's getting away from transactional to emotional. So I'm not surprised that there's a lot of people from the marketing side, and actually probably someone that's HR focused or people focused, might be a good shout to a certain, because then if you've got that people centricity, and again, looking at Pret selling, all this great vapour, magic dust coming from Clive and the way that he lives his life, of course, fiercely commercial and smart and shrewd and all these things, but one of the kindest, most genuine people you would ever meet, and the whole place runs off of that sort of energy, where it is all just kindness and naturalness, and and I think you're in a sweet spot if you can get, regardless of their discipline, someone with that ethos and that belief, that's people first. It's not easy,
I think it's one of the things that frustrates me, frankly, going to conferences in our sector is everybody stands up and talks about how their people are the most important thing to them. And I really wish, or at times, I'm so tempted to shout bollocks, because I think you look at the people standing on stage saying this, and you thought it is absolute bollocks. Yeah. And it's a very easy thing to say. It's not a very easy thing to deliver on.
No.
And I think that you've got to be really careful around how you create and how you define your values, and actually how you live them, and if you are truly living them. And I've got to say, I'm not one for a lot of the kind of mushy talk around this stuff. I actually think for me it's about defining that, being clear on what that actually means, and being clear on what the behaviours associated with that are. And if you can't define what the behaviours are, and within a very big business like Pret, that often means putting processes around those behaviours.
Yes.
So actually about the kindness that you talked about just now, that everyone that I speak to now, whenever you talk about loyalty, goes, we want to do the Pret thing. We want to give £5 to every member of staff a day, and they've got to use it, and so on. You go, but I feel that it's a great initiative, but I think it's a great initiative because it works into their culture and it helps embed their culture.
Yeah.
I think it creates a culture of giving and kindness. I think it's not. That's at odds, frankly, with some of the businesses that I've spoken to in terms of their loyalty. It's just not what they should be doing.
No.
And I absolutely get this whole human, the importance of being human and the people. And actually, I think that it's the communication with those people that makes all the difference. I think that we're seeing a greater overlap between marketing and the people departments than any other two departments. And I think we'll see a seismic shift in the way that boards are structured over the next few years. If you look and say, well, actually, the internal comms piece, you're talking about quite often a digital approach, an events approach, all of these things, which frankly are very overlapped with marketing as it is. You also, the way that you employ people and your employer branding and attracting people is very focused around creating an internal brand. It's about creating a brand that works both internally, externally, but to both customers and potential team members. And I think that we will see a merge of these positions. I mean, there's some places, I think Pizza Hut restaurant's probably the standout example of Catherine there, who already looks after both. And you think, well, it makes a lot of sense to me. How do you deliver on a brilliant brand? You deliver on a brilliant brand through people. So if you're the person that's a guardian of the brand or the person that's creating a brand, why not have it responsible for delivering that messaging to your customers as well as your team? I think that to me it's at a director level, at the kind of very senior board table seat, that person can and should look after both. I think when you get down into tactical, there's very clearly a head of marketing, kind of the kind of outreach piece. There's head of probably internal comms within bigger businesses, and then a tactical HR piece in terms of the dealing with grievances and issues and all of that stuff that maybe doesn't cross into marketing as well.
No, definitely. And I think that culture department is definitely something that's coming, and we get it a lot. We do a lot of kind of brand days and brand DNA days and stuff like that, and values come out of that, which usually drops out the personality, which then it's pretty straight. It's quite a straight line, which is your personality. We like to try and keep it neat, so make that your values too, because then if people are living that personality, then that helps your reputation as well as your culture, and the products and service kind of in the middle. And then what happens is then you say, well, then that becomes your PDP. That's what people are rewarded and recognised on, and it's not that hard, but just people and things and egos and old ways and things get in the way where they're like, oh no, but the HR department's got a set of values they've come up with, and it's an acronym that spells pizza, because I'm not saying it's as dumb as that, but there's some of that stuff going on.
Oh, have you worked with those guys too? No, I'm joking.
No, it always spells fresh, whatever it is. So you've got this, and then you're like, well, shouldn't we all just be together? So either HR, you come and meet us, or we'll come and meet you, or this is right, you come to us, or So I think that really works. And then with the USP side of things, you're in so many sessions. What's your USP? Our people, same reaction as you. Bollocks. Like, have they got more arms? What's going on? So it's just, so that pretty much usually gets kicked out, unless it's really, really, really true. We go to the great lengths to, and maybe there is a reason, but everyone, our people, really? When was the last time you stepped into one of your places? So we're usually quite kind of fierce on that.
I feel that you've just made a good point there. The presence piece, being present in your sites is vital.
Yeah.
One of the things that we really continued and drove home at Thai Leisure Group was the idea of not having marketing sitting in a head office. And I'm working with a couple of brands at the moment and kind of consulting from their side in terms of their own marketing structure and so on. This is the same basis. I'm saying, like, get rid of these desks, move them out. And actually, these people, I don't care personally where they're working. So let's face it, technology and transport is of such now where those people can come together, but they can be in sites. They can be working from home if it's most effective. They can work from a cafe. They can work from wherever they want. And actually, surely it's about the output that they create and what they're doing. Not necessarily about the hours they're working.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we talked earlier about a challenge I had with around a table with a number of senior leaders in our sector, talking about this need to change this format of actually why are restaurant and hospitality marketers working nine till 5 when the whole of our business is operating mostly in the evening and at weekends, and particularly with social media, where you're talking about this is a direct engagement with customers who ultimately are wanting to engage with your business right there and then.
Yeah.
Why are we, the amount of times I go to somewhere on a Friday or Saturday night and then get a tweet back on the Monday thanking me for coming. So it's done.
Yeah.
What you've actually proven to me is you don't get it.
You don't give a crap.
You'd be as well not to bother than to have come back to me on Monday morning. And I think with social, one of the things that we've done before, and I keep encouraging, and I'm seeing work successfully in a number of places, is actually using an annualized hours system. So saying, look, your role is fundamentally to cover social media from midday when we open until 10 p.m, which is probably the last time you're going to get for 5-6 days a week. But actually, that's all you have to do. Is you've got to manage social. So I want you to make sure that you know there's an expectation here. There's a kind of a service level of agreement per se of how long things take to respond. But do I mind, frankly, if you're going to the gym at 2:00 in the afternoon, or you're going to have your hair cut, or you're... No, I do not. Do I care, and do I want my customers to be responded to within, ideally, 15 minutes of them tweeting? Yes, I do. And I think you've got to really reposition what's important to you and how you can achieve that in the most effective way.
Yeah. I think, the virtual working thing's just a real big mindset shift, because you've got a lot of older, more traditional people, maybe, stereotypically in the higher up roles. And it's just, the smarter people are the ones that, might come in late in the morning, but the boss isn't until late, but they'll stay late because the boss is late and then they're playing that game, But I think you're right. I had a great boss called Matt Hart, who's now at Hollywood Bowl. He was at lastminute.com. And he said pretty much what you've said, maybe not so much about the haircut and stuff, definitely about the gym. But he was like, look, I don't care where you are. Just do what you need to do. But he also balanced that with, if I was emailing too late at night, he's like, I'm the marketing director, you're not. Why are you emailing me later than I'm emailing people? And that was a bit of a message as well. But it was that way. You were trying to make it, and you were trying, you were energetic, enthusiastic, and, try to make a difference. But yeah, I mean, I think the hours thing, that's got to change. I think probably the structure and position thing, this is questions coming up a lot, is the sort of structure for a marketing department too. I
mean, I find it odd that more people don't yet have content producers inside their team. Crazy. I mean, for me, I think that having someone that can do the video stuff, some base level photography, all of that write really well, makes sense. And I think that to see marketing teams of 5, 6, 7 people, and you've got no one that's what they specialise in. I think, well, come on, like this is the important step. And I think moving, I don't necessarily buy into this premise that we're all going to become media companies, because I think that it's a bit wanky in its own right, frankly. But I do think that is a skill that you need and is really important for all the things we talked about, the internal comms, your external comms, like on every level. I think also the other one for me is, I really struggle going into businesses that have the most amazing brand externally, pick up internal documents, and they're terribly designed, if not designed at all. And I think that if I'm arriving to work with you and you've got the most amazing brand, and what you deliver to me is tatty uniform that has been used by somebody else, probably some level of guide or a handbook that has been typed up on Word by somebody in HR, and this is what I'm being given. What you're telling me is you don't care about me.
Yeah.
You care more about the customers than you do with me, and about me. And it's interesting that a book that I'm sure most people listening to this have read is Danny Meyer's Setting the Table. I mean, and it's a 20-odd-year-old book, but it's still really pertinent. And I think we were really pleased to meet with his main operator, Richard Crane, who's his deputy in New York recently, and he talked about that empowering the enlightened hospitality movement that they created all that time ago. And the key to that is about putting the team first, because the team will be the ones that impress your customers and will deliver your brand to your customers.
Yeah. Well, we'll touch on New York and all these wonderful trips that you have in a sec. Just while we're on that thread, we'll give it another wee tug, just in terms of, your approach. So you're saying, you go into a business and you're judging them on that. So you get a call, hey, James, can you sort us out? Whatever the brief is. What's your approach and your ethos, and how do you go about that stuff?
I think to me it's very strategic. I don't get into the tactical delivery. I love being a creative, frankly, so I will kind of get involved in the creative where possible. But to me, there's three key things I want to find out. I want to find out, what do your team think of your brand and your business? What do customers think of your team and business, your business and brand? And thirdly, what do the leadership team think about it? And for me, that gives me the absolute basis in which to be able to move forward. So I will quite often say to people, look, we're not going to write a brief for a creative agency just now, because what we want to understand is the brief that we're writing all too often will be based on the viewpoint of the leadership team, not necessarily what's actually the perception of your brand. So why do we need to know these three things? For me, it's quite simple. The reason I need to know what the leadership team think is that gives me an idea of what their perception is and where the platform from which they're making decisions. Why do we need to know what the customers think? Because ultimately, that is our brand, as I said before. That's what people are believing, and that's what people are walking away, and that's how they're talking about our business to other people. And ultimately, that then becomes what the marketplace knows and understands. I also think that you need to understand their decision-making process, and because often it's the nuances of things they're telling me and telling you that really make the big difference, and the big opportunities for writing that creative brief come from for me. Then the third one is, why do I need to know about the team and what the team think? It's because they're probably closer to the customer, and often with the process I've worked, they're closer to the customer than the leadership team are. So what we need to understand is, once we have those three, and I've not yet worked with a business where all three are completely aligned.
No.
Never. So actually, what I need to understand then is going, do we want to bring the customers and the customers closer to where we think the brand should be? And if that's the case, then that's often about communication, it's rebranding, it's all of that stuff. Is it about us moving our brand closer to where the customers think we are, which actually is an often easier move, and again can be all the things we just talked about, but it's an easier move because you don't need to re-communicate or re-engage people in a different way. And then the third part of that is, how are we communicating this effectively to the team? And if the team are already closer to one of those two, then actually it gives us a good idea as to how we shift them and how we can communicate effectively with them to move them from there. So at that point, you then look at all of that kind of day-to-day tactical stuff of how then is your business structured? How is your marketing team structured, if we want to get down to that? What does a creative brief look like? What should your video of your CEO that's going out in 3 weeks say? It's the absolute base level of a business. And for me, it might sound it might sound a little bit patchy in the respect of, I've had lots of people go, well, you know what, I know what my business is. And you just think, well, until you've seen that research, you really don't.
You don't know.
I'm working with a client just now that had a very, very clear belief that the reason people came to their business was because it was very healthy. And actually the reality of why people came to their business was it was very convenient.
Right.
And you say, okay, well, we've got a decision to make here, guys. Now, how do we, what do we do about that?
Yeah. Well, I think that, that's one of the big things as well. Just thinking about the types of characters in the industry as well, that feels like a bit of a utopia, because I'm thinking about a lot of clients, like if, you went in and that seems like the dream brief for them, saying, I'll give you access all areas, I'll fess up, whereas it's always, a lot of it's kind of loaded with, like you say, no, the business is this, don't you get it, kind of thing. And then that's when compromises happen, and then the result isn't what you want the result to be, or even if you even mention the research word, and it's even small, or they don't have time for that, just want all action. So, there's definitely a sort of, diplomatic role to be played, or convincer role to be played, to be able to do that.
I think within what we do and within what I do, me and my colleagues do, I think it's often about being hypothesis driven.
Yeah.
And I think that you've got to go in, you've got to create a hypothesis very quickly based off very limited information.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's then about saying, well, if you think that is a distinct difference between one of those three areas, then that's the opportunity. And you know what? We have far more conversations that lead to nothing than we do that lead to something. But we can use great examples. I mean, probably the greatest example of all I can publicly talk about, because we PR'd the hell out of it at Thai Leisure, was the kids proposition work that we did. And it's probably one of the things in my career I've been most proud of. So I walked into a business within Thai Leisure Group that had signed a whole load of mall shopping centre sites for Tycoon as a brand. Tycoon had started and had developed to that point in high street locations, was heavily cocktail focused. And I thought, this is going to be different. It's a challenge. And actually what we have to do is we've got to make sure that we work for an audience in a shopping centre. And what's the audience in a shopping centre? It's mostly families. So do you know what? And what we don't do and what I don't do is deliver you a whole load of regurgitated rubbish that somebody's already published, or an amalgamation of lots of other people's thinking. To me, there absolutely needs to be fresh thinking on this. I said, well, we know that that's the case. We know that families are there. So then the next piece was saying, what is it that families want when they're coming to Tycoon? And it would have been very easy for me to set our food and beverage team up, for them to come back with chicken goujons or, pad thai in a small format and charge £5 for it and be done. And I thought, this just isn't right. I feel that Wagamama at the time were leading the way with really attracting the kids. And I think we've got a problem, because I think an Asian brand as a whole, and particularly one that hasn't necessarily got the market kind of knowledge or awareness, like we were sitting in a place of being, it seems a long way from coming from one of the Italian brands to come to us. That's who we're sitting next to in all these mall sites. Was a Bella, a Pizza Express. And that's who we're competing with. So we hired an ex-colleague of mine who's now a Telegraph parenting blogger, and said to her, look, she really gets it. She gets the parenting thing. So can you go with a member of my team, and I want you to go and speak to parents in our restaurants. We'll kind of create a party-like atmosphere, and we'll put on an entertainer for the kids, and that gives you an opportunity to speak to the parents. What I also want alongside that is for us to go and speak to the kids. So we end up speaking to 200 and something children and 200 and something parents, and we got the most amazing insight. And do you know what? As a parent, you probably get this much more than me. I'm not a parent. That's why it was vital for me to get this information. But the key piece of insight for me was, I don't like my child and the kids don't like the beans touching the chips.
Yeah.
That's the piece of insight that led us forward, right?
I can understand.
And you think...
You sometimes build a wee toast wall or something like that,
But I think that frankly, we wouldn't have got that. And actually, I think that
which beans though? What beans?
I know I'm using
generalising about. Yeah, right. Yeah, got it. Yeah,
this was but I mean, our F&B director at the time had kids, and it was a revelation to all of us. And, well, look, parents want their kids to be more adventurous eaters. Kids want to play safe. When you're walking through a mall, the person making the decision where you're going to dine will be the child, frankly. So our opportunity was we needed to create something that was fun and engaging for the kids, and then for the parents it was something that ticked the box for healthiness and it's going to keep them entertained and engaged. So what we created was we put the protein separate from the noodles, sort of and we created a bento. Right. Yeah. And what we said was we called it a mix and match. And because no kid doesn't like rice or noodles. That's what we found. What they disliked or what they weren't sure about was the sauce. So if I put the chicken separate from the green curry, light green curry sauce from the noodles, then they're safe because they can have the noodles, but they can dip it in and they can try something.
If they want.
So they feel like... So what we really drove home was a sense of adventure. We partnered with National Geographic for Kids, which is the UK's biggest magazine, and we launched this whole campaign. And we had 250 plus pieces of media in parenting blogs, and it was really, really great. But to me, it all came down to that embedding in insight. I'm not a researcher. That's not what I do at all. To me, it's insight and strategy, and then looking at how you embed that effectively in a business.
Well, I think what's so nice about what you've just said is that you stepped away from the mic, and I think there's so many people that are just like, ego driven. I know that I can do that. I can, and it's like being a marketer and going, do you know what? I'm not a copywriter, or do you know what? I can't draw, or I'm not a creative. I'm more of this, or And again, you getting someone in, realize, just having that self-awareness that you were like, actually, do you know what? I need to get a parent into. I can't do this. I think that's. What definitely helped as well in that situation. And so many marketers don't do that. It's just, I can do this, I can do everything, and that's where it all kind of goes wrong.
So many leaders don't do that, frankly. Yeah. And that's the challenge, that we don't know what we don't know. And one of the things that we've had really pick up a lot is what we're calling gap analysis. And I didn't know any other way of, I don't like the buzzword necessarily, but it's going into a business, working through how they're operating and going, hey, did you know that you could do this like this? And sometimes it's the smallest things that can make the biggest impact. And I do think that's I think it's for people like you and I, who it's what we do all day, every day. People don't necessarily consider that what you have, whilst you're very, very strict around the confidentiality